Pudding. Live and in color for the 69th edition of this very podcast you have somehow stumbled upon, the Bottom Line Podcast. If you don't know, I don't know how you got here. However, we are here. We are alive and just one day away once again from taking in the sport we know and love. Last week, my man, courtesy of MMA Oddsbreakers, AJ Schullo, came in, did a phenomenal job helping me break down UFC 249. We're back for a little bit more. AJ, how you doing, man?
Well, how are you? It's nice to be back talking about fights again. 3 fights in a week has just been surreal, but us fight fans could get used to this for sure. And it's a pleasure to have, another event here in, 3 events in a week is crazy. It's been, a little bit, not overwhelming, but, I've had a lot of work to do in terms of like the research for all these cards. I had to pull an all-nighter 2 nights ago, and it was fun, but I love this, it was a lot of work, but happily enjoyed it.
An all-nighter.
Yes.
Man, you're talking about entering waters that are unmarked with sarcasm dripping off my lips. I can't even tell you how many times I've pulled all-nighters doing literally the same exact thing, or maybe other things. However, I digress. We had a phenomenal fight card go down last Saturday. Pay-per-view seems to have done pretty well. Justin Gaethje now, of course, the interim lightweight champion. If my memory serves correct, you and I both picked Ferguson.
We actually didn't do predictions at the end.
Yeah, I know. And that makes for an awkward fill right here. However, had we done predictions, would you have picked Ferguson? Just kind of a brief touch on what took place in that fight that maybe took you by surprise, or what your overall reaction was.
No, I actually not only picked Gaethje, but I bet him. I liked it was everything we thought it was going to be, right? Just so action packed. I mean, Gaethje won 2 performance bonuses again, and the card did not disappoint. I'm glad that we saw that it was hyped up, and I'm really glad it delivered.
It really did deliver. It delivered for not only us, and whether or not the card would have been taking place under normal circumstances and ordinary parameters. I feel like it delivered for a community that needed sports. I mean, it's the first topic on Jim Rome. It's the first topic, Boomer and Gio. It's the first topic. It's leading in on a lot of heavy sports shows. And that just kind of goes to show not only the traction that the UFC and the sport can make as a whole during this pandemic, not to say that they're taking advantage of it to do so. However, it is a solid platform to have right now, especially when no one else is watching anything. And something up your avenue, obviously, that's of note. The most betted on fight card in the history of combat sports, to pretty much no one's surprise, was Saturday evening. And thank God I didn't wager any pennies, because I think 11 fights. I think I was either 5-6 or 4-7. I had a pretty rough go of it. Bounced back on Wednesday night, but regardless, wanted to touch also on the co-main event from last Saturday, and obviously the question that everybody likes to play on Twitter, social media, with all their friends whenever it comes down to this type of controversy. It's time to play with AJ Schullo, good or bad stoppage, featuring the Dominic Cruz and Henry Cejudo finish. You touch on what you thought about the stoppage and also Henry's retirement.
In terms of the stoppage, I actually personally don't have a problem with it. I think the objective thinking versus the subjective thinking is kind of like the difference here. And it could be, we all really wanted to see Cruz back, and we waited so long to see Cruz back. And when we saw the stoppage kind of the way it was, like he was conscious, but he wasn't really defending, there was a lot of unanswered strikes there. I think as fight fans, we kind of wanted a more like concrete way to finish the fight. We didn't want it, if Cruz was going to lose, we wanted him to lose in a different way, if that makes sense.
Right. No, totally.
Yeah, but because there's kind of like some slight ambiguity there, I think that's why there was a little bit of controversy. For me personally, I thought the stoppage was fine. And I'm somebody that bet Cruz. So, I personally had no problem with it. And the other question you said was, Henry's retirement. Yes. So, personally, I don't know. I'm not up in the middle of the night thinking about it. But, honestly, he's going to do what's best for him. if I had to pick one or the other, I think he probably does retire because he's kind of in a spot where, he's got a very impressive resume. I mean, the winning streak that he's walking out on is so impressive. I mean, arguably the most impressive. And he's just so accomplished and has achieved so much. And it's kind of similar to how I see Demetrius Johnson. Like, while I would really want him to be in the UFC because he's so talented, I want the guy to be happy. And being over and one makes me happy to see that, he's still a powerful figure over there, doing very well and is in good spirits. So for me personally, I'm not like strong either way. I'm like, which I want more. Basically kind of just deferred to Henry. I think he probably does stay retired, but I understand the arguments on like the contract negotiations and whatnot. So we'll see how things shake out, but my lean is that he's going to stay retired.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the potential ploy to negotiate for quote unquote another zero, as Henry would like to call it, or Henry said in the post-fight press conference. Dana kind of rebutted, whether indirectly or otherwise, in the most Dana White type facet you could ever imagine, when he just kind of point blank said, faking a retirement on national television is not a way to get more money. And if that is the ploy that Henry Cejudo is trying to pull at right now, I don't think it's going to end up getting him that extra zero or other comma or whatever it is he's looking for. And at the end of the day, if that doesn't materialize, I do too believe he will remain retired. Is he the greatest combat athlete of all time, or is that kind of a slippery slope?
Henry, you think? Or possibly. You look at the gold medal and all that he's accomplished in mixed martial arts, I think the case can be made. I haven't really thought too much about it, though. Certainly with all of his credentials, I think it's possible. But, I'd have to really think about that. At the moment, I'd probably lean yes, just off the top of my head. But that's a good question. I really like that.
Yeah, and, for the bantamweight division at this point, now going forward, one thing that I'm not sure of at all, if you want to call them mixed signals, if you want to maybe call it a promotional snafu, whatever you want to characterize it as, I see Marlon Moraes and Petr Yan on the screen with the graphic, bout signed, sealed, delivered, date to be determined for the future. Now, I don't know what they're going to do as far as that fight or as far as the future of the top of the food chain at 135 pounds, but Dana made it clear in and of himself, it's going to be Petr Yan versus somebody. Would you be okay if they just went Petr Yan and Marlon Moraes for the bantamweight title, or would maybe an Aljamain Sterling, someone like that, fill the shoes on the other side well for you?
I think that matchup would make sense. I think it's kind of interchangeable. I think you can make strong cases either way. But from a promotional perspective, I think the UFC would want to do Yan Moraes. We've seen Moraes already compete for the belt. I know that those other guys are on winning streaks, but I think that would be like a more hyped fight because they both have this reputation of being finishers. Whereas, like, yes, Sterling and Sandhagen have finished fights in the past, but I think that in terms of pure promotion, pure getting people hyped up, because we've seen, like, even though it didn't materialize, these two were initially linked to a main event bout in June for a fight.
Yep.
And so, you could have that on for the belt, I think, to kind of just solidify that it's for 135-pound strap.
And you got Sandhagen sitting right there. This is the perfect time, even though the UFC is never going to do it. This is the perfect time to implement some sort of tournament. It's the perfect time. You could have really 5 guys throw their name in the hat for 4 spots. If you wanted to throw Cruz back in there, given the circumstances and obviously what he's done in this division in the past, you got Yan, you got Moraes, you got Sterling, you got Sandhagen. I've been saying it for a while, man. 135 pounds to me is absolutely treacherous. And then you have also Jose Aldo as well. Thanks to my man No Filter down there with the comment for reminding me. You have Jose Aldo as well, lurking at 135 pounds if he just continues to try to make the weight, which still to me is a modern-day miracle. But regardless, as we continue to try to move along pretty quickly, we do have a lot to cover for the fight card tomorrow night. Real quick, Wednesday, really the big kind of movers as far as the fights are concerned for their respective divisions were really the top three. You had Hernandez and Dober, a big win for Drew Dober. And, the cataclysmic fall of Alexander Hernandez kind of continues to trickle. Back and forth fight with Rothwell and OSP. And then you had an absolutely stellar showing from Anthony Smith for the first 5 minutes. And then that kind of went away pretty quickly. As far as the stoppage as a whole and when the fight stopped and how it carried on as it did, I know we can't put ourselves in Mark Montoya, James Krause's shoes. But, man, I mean, if you're Montoya or Krause, is your fighter getting off the stool for round 5? Because I must say, like I said, I can't just definitively say this for a fact because I'm not in their shoes. It's hard for me to imagine if I were in their shoes that I'm absolutely not letting Anthony off the stool for the 5th. Would you disagree with that or take another approach?
I personally wouldn't let him go either. Yeah, I think that part of the reason why they did let him go, because we know Anthony's nickname is Lionheart, and he's well earned that. He's so tough and durable. And in a lot of these fights, I mentioned it in my free main event breakdown for these two, is Anthony in a lot of his fights, he struggles early on due to his lack of game planning, and sometimes that translates to him taking a lot of damage, him getting his back taken, him just being in vulnerable spots on the mat. But he is very tough, durable, a threatening finisher, both on the ground and in the striking. And so we've seen it time and time again, Anthony overcome that adversity and bounce back. And so I have to think that his corner was confident in his toughness and his ability to just overcome adversity, because we've seen it time and time again. But that said, for me personally, I just wouldn't let him go out there. Like, that was a lot more damage than he took in, say, like the Volkan Oezdemir fight or some of these other ones that he took damage in early on. Gustafsson, he was losing there. Hector Lombard, he was having some struggles in round 1. Like, this was, in my opinion, outside of maybe the John Jones round 4, I believe it was, the 10-8 round, this was like a really bad in terms of the damage he took. And it was for several minutes too. And it wasn't a good look. So
he took more strikes unofficially from UFCstats.com, as you can see right here on the screen. Took 138 strikes from Teixeira and only took 125 from John.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 times in his career, at least his UFC career, according to UFCstats.com, that he has even taken over 77 significant strikes. John dished out 125, Glover 138. It was really just a matter of him kind of gassing out too, because he came out, looked phenomenal in that first round. And obviously, before we get into the nitty-gritty of tomorrow night, man, all of a sudden, Glover Teixeira very quietly in a division that's kind of got their guys at the top kind of set, very quietly has put together a 4-fight win streak, having won 3 of those 4 fights by finish. Is Glover putting himself on the track to go after another run? 40-year-old Glover Teixeira. Do you see him getting to that top and maybe potentially getting another title shot?
I wouldn't put it past him. Glover, yeah, he's so tough, and he's still, like, from a technical level, he's got everything intact. He's got the striking, he's got the very good grappling, he's got the wrestling as well. But as I look at the rankings here, I don't think the UFC's updated them. But I think what makes sense would be a fight versus Oezdemir, because Oezdemir is currently ranked 2 spots above him. They both have common opponents such as Gustafsson and Smith now. So I think that's a matchup that the UFC could potentially make, because, light heavyweight's kind of, there's some ambiguity here too. Again, with the Santos injury, with Reyes arguably beating Jones, there's some ambiguity here. So I certainly would have put it past Teixeira, but I think he would, based off the rankings, need at least 1 or 2 more wins before we start to ask that question if he should get John again. But yeah, I would match him up with Oezdemir next, even though you could look at the resume and go, oh, Oezdemir lost to Smith and Teixeira won. I still think that would be an intriguing fight to make. Both guys have headline fight night cards, so I think that that's a potential booking the UFC could do.
Plus, I mean, man, rookie mistake for anyone that would try to tread down that path. MMA math doesn't add up. You know this as well as I do, and we move forward. Tomorrow night, we have ourselves one of the UFC's favorite pastimes by virtue of a 5-round headlining bout between two of the big boys. This one kind of coming in a special packaging, obviously, with everything that's going on and all of the circumstances that surround this card, just much like Wednesday night's card. It is kind of remarkable that we're going to get through these 3 cards and almost pretty much 3 dozen fights. Obviously, you had the Jacare blip and had that kind of whirlwind of worry that was taking place last week, but it's pretty remarkable that we do appear to be at the finish line of these 3 events in 9 days' time, and will get them all off according to plan, even if this one, I mean, we'll get into it. The weigh-ins were very eventful this morning with all types of things that are not normalities. You had a Uriah Faber appearance. You had a Martin Vettori appearance at 205 pounds. You had a guy that we didn't even know existed and or fought and or was going to compete on this card. That's going to be opposite Giga Chikadze. We're going to get into all of that, but obviously the main event comes first, and a meteoric rise for the big ticket Walt Harris himself coming into this main event spot against a guy who, you know, has fought maybe once or twice in his life, Alistair Overeem. When you scratch the surface of this matchup right here, it seems to me like one of those power versus finesse types of things. You know, Alistair Overeem is going to try to keep Walt on the end of it. He's going to try to keep him at distance and use what he knows best. But we've seen time and time again that does not always work out in the Ream's favor. AJ, the floor is yours. What are you thinking about Overeem and Harris on Saturday night?
I think it's a great main event. I think this is a huge opportunity for both gentlemen, but especially Harris, considering that this is his first main event spot. I expect him to be motivated here. He certainly is riding on a lot of momentum and certainly has earned this spot. So, yeah, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. You know, we know kind of how Overeem likes to fight at this stage. You know, he fights very intelligently. He wants to mitigate his opponent's threat by not taking damage, covering up when he can, and be the more technical fighter. You know, Overeem's, you know, even at this stage of his career, he's very technical. He's very well-rounded. Skill for skill, he's a very talented fighter still. But again, it's that threat of power that Harris will utilize here to win this bout. That's how Harris will, you know, likely win. That's like Harris's path to victory here is TKO, KO. And, you know, it's just one path to victory. But that said, it's certainly not a narrow path to victory. I wouldn't put it past Harris to get that there. There's a reason why he's favored. He's got a chance to win. But this is a matchup where, like you said, Harris is going to most likely be the aggressor, and Overeem is going to try to mitigate that threat, be the more technical fighter, be more well-rounded, and basically win on points or perhaps get a stoppage if the opportunity materializes.
Yeah, man. I mean, and winning on points seems to be the path of least resistance. Well, I mean, there certainly would be resistance over a 25-minute period, but you know what I'm saying when it comes to Alistair Overeem in this particular matchup. You could see right there without me, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, but not very similar tactical ways to go about winning his or her fights for the Walt Harris camp. Obviously, as you can see, every single one of his fights in the UFC that has ended with his hand raised has also ended with a KO or TKO stoppage. And Walt Harris right now, obviously, on the backbone of an absolutely horrible tragedy, and you would have to imagine that it's going to buck him up and motivate him on tomorrow night, which would leave one to believe that maybe Alistair is in trouble. Or, I mean, we've seen it time and time again. Guys go in to these fights, whether it be something that carries in on their back outside of the octagon or whether it be something that transpired in the octagon. We see guys get emotional all the time and over emotional all the time, and it doesn't always end in their favor. Do you see Walt having to deal with any type of maybe pushing down of emotions on Saturday night? Do you think that if you were Walt Harris, just for example, would fighting tomorrow night off of emotion be something you can use to your advantage?
Maybe. Yeah, there's always two ways to look at it here in terms of these intangibles. Yeah, like you said, it could fire him up. It could motivate him even more. Or it could work the other way. We won't really know until we actually like see Harris in there. But everything that I've seen from interviews, he seems like he's really motivated here. He's focused on the task at hand, and he's ready to make the most of this opportunity. So of the two, I would think that the motivation would be the one more likely to materialize here. We haven't seen him fight since July, I believe, of last year. So, we've seen him, like consecutively prior to then. He had fought, I believe, December the year before. He was fighting fairly frequently, a few months apart, but now it's a layoff. And yeah, the layoff could help or hurt. We don't really know until we see him in there. That said, it's not, he's not coming in off several years like, Cruz and Verdum were 2 years plus. So I'm not too worried in that department. But yeah, I expect him to go out there and be dialed in, do what he needs to do to get the job done. And, it should be a really fun back and forth fight. I think that certainly there will be upside with Harris if he comes out the victor here. And with one or two more wins, who knows, maybe he gets a title shot.
My man, No Filter MMA, he should definitely control them, probably talking about emotions. Because if the Reem is presented with opportunity, he will take it. And one of these stats up here on the screen that I find particularly interesting, 73% of his significant strikes land. 73%. That's crazy. However, this mark right here, too, is one to keep an eye on as well. 4.69 strikes absorbed per minute. As we try to go through the card relatively quickly, you have a gut feeling or a hunch as to how this one's going to play out? What's your gut feeling telling you for this one, just for the main event, as I know we won't be doing predictions for you all the way down the card? Just enlighten us.
Yeah, no problem. I actually broke this main event down for free, so just very briefly. I'm picking Overeem to win, but the culprit to the vast majority of his losses and the thing that has hindered him throughout his career, unfortunately, is the durability. Harris certainly has enough power, athleticism, speed, aggression to threaten that. And again, the momentum, Harris has got to be feeling good here with the momentum that he's riding. And again, a big opportunity. So I wouldn't put it past Harris to go out there and get that quick finish because, we've seen it last time in Overeem's fights in the past, against Rosenstruck, for instance. He was up either 3-1 or 4-0. He was up there, but at any point he could get hurt with a big punch and that could be the fight. So something similar can happen here with Harris, and he will be a big threat to Overeem in terms of the striking exchanges because of that big power. But technique for technique, Overeem is the better fighter, but Harris is a more durable fighter. And so I've said in my breakdown, and this might be a curveball to some, but I actually think that there's a better than 50% chance that Overeem comes out here and wrestles because he showed willingness to against Rosenstruck. It didn't work out to a T.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, he was like 2 for 10 on takedowns, but he showed willingness to go for them. And training at Team Elevation, which is a hot camp right now. Dober, Gaethje, Blades, Rose, all train there. Trevor Whitman, genius. I could see them deploying that game plan here against Harris as a path of least resistance. Now, it's not as simple as say Overeem closes distance, get the clinch, get Harris down. That's a fight. It's more to it than that. I noticed when Overeem's closing distance, again, kind of going to your earlier point about the defense, the timidity, he's not as willing to engage because of that damage. He knows he can only take so much. And especially, going up against a heavy-handed striker like Harris, he needs to be careful. And so certainly Overeem should have a better advantage on the ground, even though Overeem's thought more so as a striker. He is a very good grappler. He's got like 17 submission wins. And looking at Harris defend against Fabricio Verdum on the ground, I know Verdum is an ace on the mat, but he just passes guard very easily there and got that submission. And I think Harris has improved since then. But
Are you talking about the Verdum Walt Harris fight?
Yes, at UFC.
Yeah, but wasn't Walt Harris supposed to fight someone else, and didn't he get thrown into fighting Verdum like 2 hours before the card?
Yeah, good point. It was he was supposed to fight Godbeer, and I believe Verdum was supposed to fight Harris. So yeah, you're very well right. I think though didn't like the grappling defense there. Like maybe it just threw him into the loop with that matchup, but there wasn't really much else to go off of on tape in terms of recent fights. So I kind of have to by default refer to that. So certainly, Overeem should have the advantage in the grappling on the ground, but like we said before, Harris should be fired up here, and I expect him to come out and be the best Walt Harris we could be. So certainly picking Overeem, but I would be 0% surprised if Harris just hits him with a big punch and that's the fight.
That's literally the way I expect the fight to go. Those last few words of your sentence right there. And I do expect Overeem to have a little bit of success early on, and I do expect him to try to make things a little bit grindy, a little bit grimy, get inside, maybe work the clinch. And an underrated aspect of this matchup, as you said, could be Alistair's willingness to take Walt down, especially if he gets tagged, because then he's going to be looking for his legs. However, I don't know if you can get tagged by Walt Harris. I think you can get clipped, and I think you can go down. And I think we will see that on Saturday night, Walt Harris via first-round TKO. So as if there was anyone else for Miss Overkill Hill to pick off in the 115-pound division, which is by far the best division and most stacked division and most talented division that women's MMA has ever seen. And it comes to you in the co-main event this weekend by virtue of Claudia Gadelha, number 6 in the world, taking on Angela Hill. Claudia Gadelha has been in the UFC for, I don't know why I keep saying her name like that, has been in the UFC since 2014 and has fought the who's who and has really – you go up and down the top 15, you're going to be hard-pressed, especially in that top half, to find someone Claudia Gadelha has not faced yet. However, Angela Hill says, hold my beer, because she will be looking to fight for a third time in 2020 in only 5 months, not even to mention the fact that she fought on the tail end of 2019 as well. She's going for her 4th consecutive win, 5th win in 6 fights, in a fight that could definitely catapult her up into that top 5-ish kind of range with Gadelha at 6 right here. I expect Hill to kind of keep this fight at distance and use her kickboxing as well as she can. Do you have do you see anything similar, and or do you see maybe a different approach from Angela Hill and or Claudia Gadelha?
I would expect the same thing. Yeah, Hill needs to keep the fight striking. That's where she'll have a clear advantage here. One interesting point about Hill being busy is Angela Hill has actually fought 6 times, and Claudia has only fought once since March 2019. So certainly Angela has been a lot more active, and I have to think that's why she got the spot. Certainly she earned it. She stepped up on short notice, like against Loma last time out. Looked good there. The improvements are evident. I have to think that her grappling is improving because of the work she's doing with Wilson Hayes. For those of you that aren't familiar, Wilson Hayes used to be in the UFC. A BJJ black belt, is now working with Angela and improving her grappling. She showed that in the Hannah Cyphers fight. But yeah, like you said, I think Angela will need to keep distance, use her superior striking work rate to avoid the clinch from Gadelha, because Gadelha is strong. If she gets that clinch position, I think she'll be a threat to take Hill down. And the ground is obviously Gadelha's bread and butter. I mean, she's a 2nd-degree black belt. She's only, she's not shown to be a huge submission threat in the UFC in terms of actually like winning by submission, but we know how threatening she is on the ground. I was rewatching her fight with Carla Esparza yesterday, actually, and I know we were talking about the controversy about that. It was, again, I still look back on it. It was close. But anyway, I digress a little bit. Sorry.
You just had a comment, too, about that as well. So he was gifted the fight with Esparza. Yeah, it's pretty ironic. We brought that up last week, too.
Yeah, and that's going to be how the fight breaks down. And also the other concerns I have with Gadelha is all the injuries she's been sustaining recently, and that's part of the reason why she's been inactive. So certainly kind of like the last fight, Hill's got the momentum, and Gadelha, she won her last fight, but again, she's just been pretty inactive. So I think that's the way the matchup breaks down. The striking exchanges will favor Hill, and the grappling and wrestling will favor Gadelha. And Hill should, as the rounds progress, even though it's only a 3-round fight, it should go more and more in favor of Hill. We've seen her push a crazy pace and have excellent cardio for all 3 rounds. So that's basically the way it breaks down to me.
Going to be interesting to see maybe the differences, the contrast to Gedalia's style going forward with this fight and onward, with the move to Mark Henry and Ricardo Almeida's gym. Is this her second fight with them? I believe it's either her second or third fight since moving over there. But I do think Claudia Gadelha is the better fighter. I do think she's the more well-rounded fighter, and I do expect her to eke out a decision here and hold Angela Hill off, at least outside of the top 15 for now. But knowing Angela Hill, she will probably be taking another fight within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Now, here's one that fight fans, sports fans, action movie fans, fans of violence can get behind. And that's when this guy, there he is. This guy is involved. I'll tell you what, you and I obviously share something in common. That would be that we've seen a lot of fights. We've watched a lot of film. We've taken a lot of notes, and we've done a lot of mental markup when it comes to sanctioned violence. There's only 2 or 3 guys in the sport historically, talking active fighters and fighters from the past, that cause my heart rate to double as soon as they're clapped in. Edson Barbosa, if he is not the prime example, he's top 2, top 3 every single time. Even in the Khabib fight, when he was getting taken down constantly, you just have this feeling, or at least have this notion, that you can't escape the feeling that he could get up and just blast with another Terry Adams sized seismic wave. That's the kind of chops that Edson Barbosa brings to the table. But man, he's got a tough welcoming to 145 pounds, taking on Dan Ige. Dan Ige, I met Dan in Houston a few months ago. Really, really nice guy. That was right after his win over Mirsad Bektic. Man, this could be an absolute banger between these two. You'd have to imagine that Dan is probably not going to want to keep it standing unless he knows something that we don't. Would you disagree?
Yeah, this is a matchup where, like, Edson Barbosa, like, it's actually a really good stylistic matchup for him, but you factor in that, you said he's an exciting guy, but also he's just taken so much damage, unfortunately. You pointed out, like, the Kevin Lee fight, and that was one of those fights where he was taking a lot of damage, but then it was in the 3rd or 4th round, he actually hit Kevin with that spinning wheel kick and had Kevin rocked.
That's what I'm saying, though, man. Like, you've got to be on the edge of your seat when this dude fights.
Yeah, and so at any point in the fight, he could be a threat to do something similar. He's, it's no secret, but he's the better striker here by I think, a wide margin, more varied, more technical, reach advantage, size advantage. The thing, though, and Ige's another guy that's got the momentum on the side of him, whereas Barbosa doesn't. He's been struggling to consistently win fights. You could say what you want. The Felder could have gone either way, the Felder fight, the second one. But this is a matchup where it's like, I don't know that it's like this great matchup for Ige. Like, geez, what you said, he has big power in his hands, so maybe he just threatens the durability of Barbosa with a big shot. But technique for technique, Barbosa is way ahead of him. And the other path to victory for Ige is to, take him down and use his very aggressive ground and pound. And he's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But the thing, though, that makes me less certain that that's going to happen is I just don't perceive Ige as this relentless, power wrestler that Khabib and Kevin Lee are. Looking at that on tape, Kevin Lee and Khabib took Edson down, yes, and once they took him down, they inflicted a lot of damage on him, unfortunately. But they didn't have an easy time getting him down. Khabib was 4 for 13 on takedowns. Kevin was 4 for 11, really picking him up there and throwing him down. I don't know if he hasn't really shown to be that guy to go out there and shoot 7, 8, 9, 10 takedowns. So I certainly wouldn't put it past him to win. He's certainly riding more momentum. He's more durable, but it's a tricky matchup from a handicapping perspective, because while it is a good matchup for Barbosa on paper, it is a matchup that Ige, with all these red flags on Barbosa, could come out here and win and just continue to ride that momentum. So really good matchmaking for the UFC. I think we'll learn a lot from both guys here.
Absolutely. And I think what I took away from your little tidbit there, 4 of 13 for Khabib, that kind of range. What does that tell you, though? That tells you, especially with how we knew the fight transpired, that tells you that Kevin Lee and Khabib both taking him down 4 times on 13 or 14 attempts. What that tells you and I is that once Barbosa is down, guys have been able to keep him there. And I know, at least from Kevin Lee's perspective, other than the spinning kick that wobbled Kevin, like you mentioned, one of the things I remember about that fight is how easily Edson allowed Kevin Lee to pass guard and pass into half and pass into side control. It's not a guy that you want passing, all willy-nilly in Dan Ige here. And I do believe that Dan Ige holds serve, even though Edson Barbosa will be electric in this division going forward. And I'd love to still see the Josh Emmett matchup materialize. I'm going to go Dan Ige by submission here. I think Dan Ige is on a tear. He will be the winner of 6 straight in the featherweight division if he gets this job done. No win bigger than the one over Junior. So we move along, and Eric Anders and Krzysztof Jotko at 185 pounds. A couple of guys still trying to find their way to climb up the 185-pound division. Both guys have had their ups and downs. But what do you think when you scratch the surface? Is there one aspect of either guy's game or either guy's craft that you see here being the perpetual X factor? Do you see one trait that either of these guys possesses potentially being the X factor against the other in this matchup?
I'm not so sure. I think this is going to be a close fight because they both fight at such a slow pace, low output. They're both timid in striking exchanges. Anders has got the big power, but unfortunately, due to his low striking output, he can't be as big of a threat with his power than he otherwise would be if he was more aggressive. And Jotko, as we've seen, is good at nullifying his opponent. He's not like the most dangerous finisher. He's only got 1 win in the UFC by finish, but he's really good at fighting competitively, nullifying your attack, making sure that his defense is in check. He works with American Top Team. He's in great company and all that. And so this fight screams to me like it's going to be an Anders knockout, or it's just going to go to decision where they're both kind of striking at low paces. Not a lot of wrestling and grappling. I don't see that being a major factor here. Neither guy shows willingness to really go for takedowns, and they're both BJJ brown belts. So I wouldn't expect a dominant performance either way. So it's going to be won or lost on the feet. And I just think Jotko is going to edge it out a little bit just because of his better defense. And he has a little bit more urgency to accumulate offense. But Anders here wouldn't put it past him to get the job done. It should be competitive. But this is just one to me that it screams it's going to be close on paper.
And by all indications, it is close on paper. That number, though, right there in the middle of the screen points out and highlights exactly what you brought up. The striking defense, 4.06 absorbed every 60 seconds for Eric Anders. That's proven to be the bugaboo for his UFC tenure. Both of these guys looking to get back on the right track. Eric Anders, out of these two guys, definitely you could say has more of a fight-ending potential in his hands, maybe as opposed to Krzysztof Jotko. We've seen Eric Anders finish fights at 185 and 205 pounds with his hands before. Krzysztof Jotko has kind of just teeter-tottered up in the division, kind of trading wins and losses back and forth. I'm going to go with Eric Anders here, though. I think Eric Anders will find that big shot. The grappling, 85% takedown defense for Jotko. Like you said, man, it's a very close matchup on paper. Both guys trying to find their footing in this division and get back on a roll to take them back into the top 15 where both of them have resided in the past. I'm going to go with Eric Anders to fit that mold. So as of right now, I just checked Twitter. This fight is on. Now, it's at 145 pounds. They've been doing that this week. They did that with was it Azure and Kelleher where they bumped it up to 145 pounds. There was a bantamweight fight on Wednesday, or there was a fight between two natural bantamweights on Wednesday that they moved up to 145 pounds. I can't remember if it was Kelleher and Azure, or Kelleher and Azure, or someone else. However, this one is going to be getting the same treatment. The fact that Marlon Vera, on the run that he is on right now, is just now getting a top 15 guy, let alone the fact that he is 15 and he's just getting the number 14 guy. I think this is long overdue. Marlon Vera, think off the top of my head, I'm gonna guess off the top of my head before I look it up, is on a 6-fight win streak, 6 or 5? 5-fight win streak. All of those fights ending by way of stoppage. Luigi Buren, Guido Canetti, Frankie Saenz, Nolan Hernandez, and Andre Ewell. He got all of those guys out of there in the allotted time to do so. Song Yadong, obviously, young, up-and-coming prospect from China. He's a guy that I've had my eyes squarely on ever since he debuted in Beijing. Go ahead and take it away. What do you think about this matchup?
When I first saw this matchup, I'm like, man, this is going to be awesome. Both guys have exciting reputations, in terms of finishing capabilities. Vera, has he's been in fights before where he's kind of struggled early on, like against Canetti, but then he'll just wake up and then get right back into the swing of things in the next round and just, go after the finish. And so they're both so young too. Yadong is 22, I believe, and Vera is 27. So at their respective ages, they've already proven to be threatening finishers, skilled fighters, and like you said, bantamweight, very good division, and these guys stand out amongst them. So really looking forward to this one. It's going to be action, I think, for as long as it is. And I think Yadong is a more technical fighter, but Vera, I think, fights at the higher pace. And if it goes to the ground, I would favor Vera. He's a 10th planet jiu-jitsu black belt. Yadong's got some BJJ credentials as well, but I would favor Vera in that sense. But very good matchmaking. I'm really looking forward to this one. And even if it goes to decision, it's one of those fights similar to Borg Simone, where they should just be kind of fighting at such a high pace that it should be fun as it is,
Yeah, absolutely. And 206 War Eagle chiming in. Good experience between both fighters. I look for Yadong to make a statement and advance himself in the rating at the expense of Vera's winning streak. So reading that and thinking about this matchup in particular, just kind of a question to pose off of you. I, as I said, am high on the prospects of Song Yadong. I think he has a lot of tools to work with as far as nourishing and helping grow a young fighter. What's the way I'm trying to ask? What are the words I'm looking for? He let me down, for lack of better words, in the fight with Cody Stamann. When a fighter that you are particularly high on or have your eyes on going forward that's in the up-and-coming ranks, and they have one of those outings where they kind of lay an egg, kind of like I feel Song Yadong did against Stamann, do you hold that over them, just in particular, just in general? Do you hold that over said fighter whenever you're kind of glancing across prospects? Do you think, oh, well, this guy's got talent, but man, that last performance really left a sour taste in my mouth? Is not asking you if that's what you're particularly thinking here with Yadong, but just in general, because that's kind of what I'm stuck on going forward with him. I need to see him go out there and put on one of those performances that he had prior to the Cody Stamann fight in order for me to kind of trust him as a prospect full on again. Do you kind of share that same sentiment, or am I talking nonsense?
It's a case by case basis for me. I always look at the circumstance, and in this case in particular, just because it's the most convenient one, he lost to Stamann basically because drew with Stamann partly due to the fact, he had that point deduction in the first round due to that illegal shot. And then also Stamann was able to wrestle him. And what I saw from Stamann in that bout was, Song, as we've seen, is a great athlete. He's actually got a really good sprawl. But Stamann was actually able to take Yadong down from his chain wrestling. Yadong working at Team Alpha Male he's naturally going to get better as with wrestling, just working with those guys. They're well known for the wrestling, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, that matchup against Stamen, I kind of like look at, okay, why wasn't the performance good? Well, he got out wrestled by Stamen, who's a very talented fighter, as we know. Stamen himself is a guy that hasn't looked, great every time out. He lost to Sterling, but Sterling's a great fighter, and then had that back and forth fight with Caraway, who's also very talented and proven. So I just look at the circumstance as it is. Now, that said, with Yudong in particular, the thing why I think that Bear has a shot here is I did notice that Yudong was gassed in round 3 against Stamen, and I get it that was due to like a wrestling-heavy style, which is naturally going to tire you out more than, say, pure striking. But he was very tired there, and we know Bear could push a heck of a pace. He's urgent, when he needs to be, and not, not like reckless or anything like that. But that would be my concern with Yudong going forward, is like that cardio, and if he faces a wrestler with like strong chain wrestling, like a Cody Stamen or somebody like that, that would where I would be like, okay, maybe I should hold back on a bet on him, because like you, I like him as well. I bet him in the past. I bet him against Perez, and I bet him against Stamen too. But yeah, I just look at the circumstances.
Had to feel good betting him against Perez, man. That right hand rocket.
That was nuts.
Our man 206 War Eagle, if it's early in the career, stinker wins or losses are an opportunity to grow, and he seems to have the tools to learn from his performance. I agree wholeheartedly. 46 minutes goes by in a jiff, and as I said, we didn't have a whole lot of time, at least on my end today, to get really in the nitty-gritty like we did last week for the pay-per-view. However, there are some pretty juicy prelims. I want to leave it up to you. I know the one that sticks out in my mind. Matt Brown and Miguel Beza is the featured prelim. I don't really understand the logic behind throwing someone as new to the UFC as Beza in the octagon with a guy like Matt fucking Brown of all people. However, I digress. Is there I know there's a prelim that sticks out to me, just jumps off the page, regardless of recent history, wins and losses, whatever may have you. Is there a prelim that you look at the fight bill and you see and just like, wow, that's a great fight?
Yeah, I like the one you picked too. There's a couple of them, but I think the one that most stands out to me is Elkins Landwehr.
Brown and Beza wasn't mine. Like it's Elkins and Landwehr. Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
you and I are in agreement.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we're on the same page as to why, they both generally are in exciting fights. Landwehr has only fought once in the UFC, but that was actually back and forth for as long as it was, right?
But
go ahead.
How much tape pre-UFC of Landwehr have you seen?
I've seen like 3 or 4 of his fights. Yeah.
Have you seen both the Kolesnik fights? If you have not seen his second fight with Victor Kolesnik, the moment this broadcast is over, you turn to your TV, find it, and watch it. In my opinion, dude, that fight has every single possible bullet point to make a case for Fight of the Year 2019. I am not kidding. Landwehr and Victor Kolesnik too. What promotion was it in? It
was a Russia run.
Yeah. Was it ACB? No. I can't remember. I'm going to look it up because it's going to bother me. But his second fight with Victor Kolesnik, oh my God, dude, you wouldn't believe it. Like if you haven't seen it, Victor M1. Mm-hmm. M1. He was the M1 featherweight champ for a while. And yeah, I mean, you've got to see his second fight with Victor Kolesnik. After that fight was over, I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, there's just no way this guy fights under the M1 banner unless he's contractually obligated going forward, because dude, that guy has UFC all over him. I love the Herbert Burns matchup. Obviously didn't go his way, but dude, I mean, you want to talk about two guys that have an affinity for war. It's these two guys. What have you seen from Landwehr that kind of puts in your head, or at least leaves the notion fresh on your mind, that this is the prelim to look for of the ones given to us?
I think that it'll just make for an exciting bout. We know that Elkins has got the reputation of being durable, but a part of the reason why is because he's been in a lot of these back and forth fights. You know, he's in these like high action sort of affairs, like against, you know, Michael Johnson, for instance. The first round didn't go his way, but he quickly turned things around. Mirsad Bektic, very notably in the third round there, turned things around. And we've seen Landwehr, like you said, that was the one thing that stuck out to me with Landwehr is he's kind of down for that, you know, battle type of fight. You know, he's willing to give a lot of damage, take some. And I think that the way these two match up stylistically will make for an exciting fight. Now, it's certainly possible that Elkins just takes him down and passes his guard. I think that would probably be the path of least resistance for Elkins. But while this fight stays standing, I think we could agree that the way they match up, it should be fun. It should be like relatively high output. And I think Landwehr would probably be the aggressor, but certainly Elkins is game. But it's pretty fun for the way they match up stylistically, despite the fact that they don't, you know, Landwehr's only fought once, but Elkins hasn't been known for like the Justin Gaethje of performance bonuses, just consecutive, you know. So I like it.
This is clearly the fight of the night. Leader in the doghouse, at least without any seconds ticking off or anybody getting clapped in. Certainly more than 36 hours away from the fact, or at least approximately 36 hours. Regardless, that just about does it for Mr. Schullo and I. Another solid recap. AJ, thank you very much once again, my man. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can find your stuff, and also where they can find your breakdowns, paid and or unpaid. If people want access to it, go ahead and let them know.
Thank you, Davidson. Pleasure to be on with you. Yes, I can be found on Twitter at AJ MMA Betting. Also could be found on Instagram under the same handle. My bets could be purchased on my website, ajsactionpacksportsbets.com. It's also in my Instagram and Twitter bio. Also, my picks could be found on MMAoddsbreaker.com. Under the premium section, I'm amongst 5 other very talented handicappers, very grateful for the opportunity. And free content, all you need is just to subscribe to my mailing list, which again is on my website homepage. All you need is just your name. You don't even have to put your last name if you don't want. Your name, your email address, and I'll be more than happy to send you free content. I've already sent out Davidson some stuff, and happy that people are listening to me. It's awesome.
I've read every word of it. I highly recommend it, highly suggest it to anyone out there looking to get an edge. This is the guy to do it. All the guys at Oddsbreakers are really good at what they do and really good at forecasting what we love. For Mr. Schullo and I, we hope you enjoy the fights tomorrow night. Next time around, it'll be episode number 70, I believe. It'll be an NFL over-under special that we're going to be trying to do here at the beginning of next week. But until then, my name is Davidson Baker. This is The Bottom Line. Until next time.